My name is Henry Chan, and my colleague Ruben is flying in from Singapore, and hopefully he doesn't miss the flight is not delayed. Yeah, it's raining now. So we will have a two-part presentation. The first is done by myself, and later on at 2:30 it will be done by my colleague. We are looking into this topic about carbon finance, which is to many of us is a new topic, and how we can bring this stuff that is hanging up in the air to actually bring to ground, and how it can support our work, which is actually the landscape interventions. So there will be two parts presentation, as I mentioned. The first one done by myself. I'll be looking at forest fragmentation in Malaysia, and which is a cause of major biodiversity loss. And at this moment now, there are a major happening in the world now called the European Union Regulations on Deforestation. It's going to be a major impact on some of the trades, especially there are 6 commodities: palm oil, soya bean, coffee, cocoa, timber, and beef. Yeah, why is this so? Because to open up plantations for these commodities, you really need to have a lot of land, and land is not a free commodity, and so government usually allocate spaces for plantations development, and typically it's forests, and so the forest is an important element for climate change and so on. So that's why the law has been formulated in the European Parliament, supposed to be in place last year, but because of the difficulties in terms of enforcement and compliance, it has been delayed to the end of this year. So in several conversations that I have, I'm putting palm oil as one of the opportunities for us to improve the industry. But this session, we are going to talk about how the work we do on the ground, in terms of this impact of plantations towards biodiversity. I am going to share with you very quickly 5 areas. The first is about the forest cover that we have in Malaysia. Number 2 is how the government authorities in the context of Peninsula Malaysia is Plan Malaysia to work with various agencies and stakeholders to have this 3-area plan. In Malay, it's called Rancangan Kawasan Khas, and it's to be legislated at the state level. The second is the work that we do in Sabah, how we bring different stakeholders together to ensure that conservation is underpinning the work that's happening at the land use level. And the fourth is addressing the issue number 1, which is about forest conversion and deforestation, how we need to undertake restoration to build our forest again. And lastly, going to the heart of this conference is how does climate change be part of that conversation. So this map here is a pretty new map that we have developed. Actually, the last week or so, we've been very busy preparing a presentation from our patron, Sultan Nasrin tomorrow. And we had this presentation yesterday with the Minister of Natural Resources and the Environment. So we were scrambling to produce maps. There are many kinds of maps and many methodologies, but eventually we come to this. So you find that all the green color are the remaining forests covered in Malaysia, based on 2023 information from the Global Forest Watch. And at the turn of the last century, basically almost all Malaysia is covered by forests. Only the west part of Peninsula Malaysia, where some extent of land has been developed for rubber plantation, towns, and so on. But basically, almost whole Malaysia is covered by forests. And in 1992, because of the issue of loss of habitat, a campaign against timber, and so on, so you may come across the World Conference of Environment and Development, giving birth to Agenda 21. For those of you who were in the universities in the 80s, 90s, this is about that. So our then Prime Minister Mahathir in Rio de Janeiro in the 1992 conference pledge that Malaysia would keep our forests, at least half the country for forests. And then that conference gave birth to a number of conventions. So, for example, the Climate Change Convention, the UNFCCC, and the Convention on Biological Diversity. So the Convention of Biological Diversity gave birth to what we call the National Policy on Biological Diversity. And eventually it's a mother to many other conservation framework. So what we then do is that as a country, we decided to protect, by law, two broad categories of forests. One is the forest reserves, and the second is a protected area. So you might know protected area by way of national parks, sanctuaries, places for recreation, and so forth. The other category is actually meant for timber production. It's called a reserve forest, where sustainable forest management can be undertaken to produce timber. So the red hatch are actually the protected areas, and the green color are the forest reserve. But there's overlap between these two categories. So for instance, you find some of the red color overlay over the green. This is actually the double category. So what we then do is we did an analysis for Peninsula Malaysia, Sabah and Sarawak, to differentiate between the two. So this is again can be contested because of the information that we have is not very accurate, because government doesn't provide some of the maps. They are considered as confidential, even though it has been approved by Parliament, so it shouldn't be confidential anymore. But somehow, that's how our government provides information. But still, it gives a general understanding of what our forest looks like in Malaysia. There are a lot more forests that have not yet been protected by law, especially in Sarawak. So if you go back to the other map, see this is the forest cover in Malaysia. And this is the places that they've been gazetted by law. So there are still more places that are yet being protected. Now, I'm moving to the second topic about land use planning. So Plan Malaysia is the authority in Peninsula. In Sabah is the Town Planning and Regional Planning Department. In Sarawak it is the Land and Survey Department. They are the ones who undertake land use planning and eventually submit to the Council Negeri to be gazetted. So in the last year, we were invited by the Minister of Economy to come up with proposals for the 13th Malaysia Plan. The Malaysia Plan is a 5-year development plan. It always starts in the year 11 to 15, and then 16 to 2020, the zero, is a 5-year plan. So we are entering into the 13th Malaysia Plan next year, 2026. So the invitation calls for very innovative and very challenging ideas. So my colleague then challenged me, said, "Look, Henry, since you're always talking about all these, innovative ideas, why don't you come up with an innovative proposal?" So we come up with this plan called Breeding Malaysia as a Wildlife-Friendly Palm Oil Nation. This is to counter the argument that we have lost our forests, we have lost our species, our orangutan, tigers, and so on. But really, it must be underpinned by structures in society and in law. So what we then look into is looking at the district plan. So this taking an example of Pahang, all the district mentioned here, so that Plan Malaysia would then undertake consultation and to establish this area to be gazetted. So then get to an example of Lipis district. Why Lipis? Because it's an area of high value for conservation. It's next to Taman Negara, and if you see all the green color, there are still a lot of forests there. And the non-greens are the other land users, including palm oil plantation and so on. This will be shared with you, the presentation. So you look at the legend, there are a diversity of land users within that district. So what we then do is we collaborate with Plan Malaysia to have this district gazetted as a special district plan. And this is a replication of the work that we do in Sabah. And so I'm going to spend more time on the Sabah because it's where we are very familiar with. We spent for the last 10, 15 years different locations and places to work with the different authorities. So 6 years ago, we came up with this approach called the Living Landscape approach that integrate everything together to look into how good land uses look like on the ground. And the living landscape approach is underpinned by three principles. There's three rows here. The one is that we want to protect. Number two is to produce. And the third is to restore. What protect means is we look at the existing protected areas and forest reserve, places important for conservation like the tigers, orangutan, elephants, places important for river systems and so on, and we protect them. Yeah, we work with our government to protect them. Or we identify places where it requires protection, then we give the information to the relevant authority, and then they will enact the plans to protect them. And this gives birth to national parks and so on and so forth. Now the second is if you look into the map earlier, yeah, the remaining forest cover and so on, and as well as the protected area map. So Malaysia actually adopts a very systematic land use plans. You zone out area, and therefore these are for this and that purposes, urban area, agriculture area, and so on. So for development of the country, you need to produce, right? For poverty alleviation, you need to provide space for people to undertake agriculture and so on. So what we then do is at these places that government has allocated for non-forested activities, focusing on agriculture, we then work with the industries for it to be sustainable and leading towards certification. So we call it produce pillar. And the third area is that as government has allocated land, it has caused fragmentation of our forests. The forests are no longer, as a single piece, but they're fragmented. So there's a need to reconnect them. So when you have undertaken the connectivity, then you need to restore them. So this is the third pillar. So we'll go now straight to one example of the land use that we're working on. It's called the Tawau Kunak landscape. It's at the southern part of Sabah. And based on the legend on the left, again, different type of land uses, but we have more details coming. If you compare to the one that you saw earlier in the Lipis district, it's just different land uses. But here you're talking about different categories, as symbolized by the different colors. It also talks about the palm oil industries and those that are members of the Roundtable for Sustainable Palm Oil, RSPO, as shown in those shaded area. Yeah. And so this landscape, Tawau Kunak encompasses 3 districts, 2 full districts of Tawau and Kunak, as well as part of Kelabakan district. So this is Tawau, and this is Kunak, and this is Kelabakan. Now, why do we put these 2 districts together? It is because for conservation, you really need to look into large area, because things like tigers, they move across boundaries, across places, rivers, alongish, right? So you need to have that ecological context, to look at the places that you want to work on. So the point, second bullet point, that talks about land uses. So in terms of forests, we have like more than 100,000 hectares, which is forested areas. And palm oil is about more than 60%, about 200,000 hectares, and other type of land uses, other plantations. So within this landscape, they are very important for river systems, source of river, and so on. So that's why in the middle you have these 2 big blocks of forest. Can I show this one? Okay, this is the Kelabakan, and this is Tawau Hill Parks. This is the national park, a protected area. This is forest reserve, and all these are different categories of forest reserve, but they're all surrounded by palm oil. So this is the first layer of information on the land users. Now, because we're talking about conservation, we're talking about the campaign against palm oil. If you go to Europe now, in some places there are campaign no palm oil. Yeah, it can cause a collapse of the palm oil industry, and Malaysia is very much dependent on palm oil, right? 20% of our total land mass, which is 6.5 million hectares, have been designated for palm oil. And if this palm oil industries is no longer having a sustainable product, then you can cause a crash of the economy, and millions of people are affected. And those millions are the Malay community. So we can laugh at that because, basically, when we look at commodities to support the rural communities, Now I'm an anthropologist. Yeah, I'm almost 60 years old. I've lived with communities doing research. Whenever the price is good, they will plant it. When the price has collapsed, they will just, abandon it and plant a new crop. So pepper was good at one time. They plant pepper. It's very expensive to plant pepper. And then the price collapsed, and then you plant rubber. When rubber has no price, they plant cocoa. When the disease hit the cocoa industries, they have no choice to plant something else. And today, palm oil is the most stable for them. Yeah. So it's very important that we help the palm oil industries to be sustainable. So looking into that context about wildlife conservation and so on. So this map is a composite of a lot of information here. I would say millions of dollars have been spent to collect data. One example is you see these strips of thing, yeah? These are actually helicopter flying over Sabah, straight line, and we have colleagues looking down on the right and the other one look on the left, looking for orangutan nests. And by helicopter you cannot fly, weather like this you cannot fly, it's a mountain area and so on. So we see different information, we analyze them. So the category is looking at this. So all the brown color are with high orangutan presence, the yellow color are low orangutan. Yeah, so there's one layer of information, and it's collected over 2 time period, 2010 and 2020. Yeah. So through our information gathering over this 2 time period of 10 years apart, we found that the orangutan population in Sabah is stable at 11,000. Yeah. And it's because Sabah government has adopted the good policies of keeping large forests. And most of the orangutan are found in the forested areas. But the real decline happened in the palm oil plantation landscape. Obviously, the orangutan homes have been lost. Yeah. We have other information like elephants. So this are actually a composite or satellite location of the elephant's movement. So we call her the matriarch, the mother or the grandmother of the elephant, which is the boss of the group. And this color are linked to the satellite. So every 4 hours, there's a pink link to the satellite. And that information is then relayed to our database. For the last 10 to 20 years, depending on the places, we have that information. So we see these are all the places that elephants are moving about. Yeah, some have no elephants because the plantations have set up electric fence to keep the elephants out, so there's no elephants there. But consequently, some elephants have no place to go, but they go to the community land, where the orang kampung cannot afford to have these fences, and they will destroy the crops. Yeah, can you imagine after you have retired as a government servant, you use the money the government has given you, what you call the gratuity, you invest in planting palm oil and all the crops, and this elephant herd just come and wipe overnight, and you lost your years and years of savings and investments. So that resulted in sometimes in the past literally killing. Yeah? People can kill them by poisoning and so on. So really there's a need to develop human-elephant conflicts methodology to enable coexistence of human and elephants. So with all this information that we put together, yeah, so there are many dimensions of work that we are doing. Yeah. For one example is like we are working with this company called Sabah Softwood over here. Yeah. Now, Sabah Softwood to us is a celebrated case of a successful collaboration of a palm oil plantation. They've actually allowed elephants to move freely in the plantations. So I call them resident elephants. There are 2 groups of them. And this is something very innovative. Other companies wait and see whether it works or not. So basically, elephants just need to eat, right? Like all animals, they need for food. And after eating, they need to rest. And in the hot afternoon sun, they need to have siesta. They will go to river and drink water, and then they will sleep under the shade. So then they move on looking for food. So what the company does is to follow the elephants. So they have got elephant team just to monitor the elephants' movement. And after the elephant have gone, then the other groups would follow suit. Yeah. So basically, it's avoiding the conflicts. And one of the things that we were doing is to ask them to establish corridors. So linking this forest, which has been fragmented from the central forest, this is a huge forest in Sabah, and to reconnect the two. And they have set land aside of 1,000 hectares tighter land, so lost opportunity of millions. If they plant palm oil, they're taking millions of dollars in the future, but they had decided not to do that, but for elephants. So that wildlife corridor set aside by company has become an exemplar of good management, and it's been adopted by many companies. So what other information would I like to share? So we also have this set of information based on what we call an atlas. We have developed a wildlife atlas for Sabah based on information from the past, or the PhDs, the masters, government reports of the locations we put into the atlas. So we say this is actually areas that once were the home of this wildlife, right? And that establishes that this area historically is actually a wildlife conservation area. So with all this information that we put together, we then look at restoration, which is to reconnect all these fragmented forests. Now, this map here talks about the forest cover, or the green color, and then there's a shade of dark green, which is actually more than 70% forest cover, going to less than 40%. These are the white color, and you find that most of the forests obviously are in the protected areas and forest reserve, all the different places. But there are also areas that have not been planted in the palm oil plantations, as signified by the white color here, and so on and so forth. So the idea is to, number one, wherever there's a forest, they have low forest cover, we want to restore them. So there are 6 blocks of areas where we are undertaking forest restoration, and it costs a lot of money. We are talking about $1,500 for restoration per year, and you need 5 years, because after planting you need to take care of the plants, and therefore 1 hectare, $1,500 times 5, So if you look at this area, 40% of the landscape is actually about 24,000 hectares, has very low forest cover. So these are the places we need to restore. You just multiply this by $7,500, over time, how much money is needed. And that leads to what my colleague later will talk about, the financing part. So we have 6 potential areas for restoration. And the light color here, the purple color, are talking about connectivity, to reconnect all these fragmented forests. From here, the corridor I mentioned earlier, Sabah Southwood, connecting from Kulumpang to the Central Forest, and so on and so forth. This is why you look at the landscape level. When you look at the statewide level, this is the map. Sorry, before I go to that map, after planting the trees, you also need to monitor them, because if you don't, they will die, right? So we have developed a system called Survey 123, which is a very robust way to monitor the forest. And every dots that's shown here are single trees. So we monitor them every couple of months as our people go and clear the forest, clear the grove. They will do the recording, and this recording is in this data sheet. You can see the tree growing, things are not growing well, what happened. And all these are related to the soil condition. There are a lot of effort put into here to undertake restoration. So by having this system approach, then we know that the trees that we're planting will, the level of mortality is decreased, and survival therefore increases. So with that, we then look at the whole set of Sabah. So Sabah, so now we are seeing that all Sabah, we have about almost 870,000 hectares of land is degraded. So while we're very happy that Sabah has a lot of forests, but the land is actually quite in bad shape condition. Later I'll show to you another work that we've done with financed by the MOF. So there are 6 areas potentially for restoration. These are all these areas, and this information that we have provide a plan for the statewide restoration decision for Sabah, which my colleague will be presenting. But the overall objective is to increase integrity of forests. They will therefore enhance biodiversity conservation and nature-based carbon capture. I'm using the word nature-based because it's the in thing now. It's like NBS, nature-based solution. Carbon capture is actually carbon sequestration. And when the trees they look outside, right, through photosynthesis, they absorb the carbon dioxide, the carbon, the C, is being captured and retained by the growing tree. All these are carbon, yeah, and the oxygen is being released, yeah. So it's to me it's a carbon capture as well. Now, when we have undertaking this, this is the science that comes in. We need to measure. Yeah, we want to ensure that the work that we do actually provide a space for wildlife conservation. Remember, right at the beginning, yeah, I was talking about the European law on on UDR and so on. It's a campaign against palm oil, against timber and so on because of the habitat loss. So when we undertake restoration, we need to measure them. I mean, you ask companies like Sabah Sabut to set land aside 1,000 hectares. Now, the manager, if he goes to the board for the approval, he must have facts, right? So, and you're talking about statewide level, right? It costs billions of ringgit, right, for government to set land aside and so on. You really have to prove scientifically that it works, yeah? So we call this bending the curve of biodiversity loss. Over time, as planet Earth continues to lose its space for development and so on, the space available for wildlife conservation is been decreasing. So it's like a hockey stick, it will slide down. But there come a point when the sliding will stabilize. And the hockey stick is a curve, right? That's what we call the threshold. And human society is able to adapt and to recognize there are problems, yeah, and therefore we change, yeah. So this is the way it happens, yeah, and we believe that over the last 10 years, there are a lot of movements in the world now to actually bring a change, yeah. And I was very fortunate to be in the two big conventions in 2015 in Paris Agreement when Paris was signed, yeah, for the climate change, and in 2022 in Montreal for the Convention on Biodiversity that gave birth to a new framework called the Global Biodiversity Framework. So we're very happy to be involved in these two conventions. So there are a lot of movements now that have led to the threshold no longer going below. And once we have put in place things, then things will spiral upwards, right? Just the notion spiral downwards, right? If you don't do anything, things will just go from bad to worse. In contrast, if you put things in order, things will come better and better. So we believe that over time, our planet Earth would have more spaces to bring up. So in climate change, it's about reducing emission and increasing forest cover. And the reason why we see Minister asked me yesterday and our patron Sultan Nadrin tomorrow is about, if you go to the website now, go and log into a newly launched webpage called the Tropical Forest Forever Facility. The Tropical Forest Forever Facility, TFF, is an attempt of Brazilian government to restore, to conserve more than a billion hectares of forest in Amazon, Congo, and Southeast Asia, and to raise funds of $125 billion to support this work. So we believe there are initiatives, and we are part of that process. So I come to the last part now, and this is come to the heart of why you are here. How do we link this to climate change and to net zero? So you go to our WWF-Malaysia website or BCG. We have undertaken a study ahead of the Glasgow COP. At the time, there was a movement to go for net zero, yeah, throughout the world. And so we did a study for how Malaysia can attain net zero by 2050. And the report is called Securing Our Future, yeah, Pathway for Malaysia for Net Zero. Now these two diagrams are very important. They underpins why Malaysia in 2020, during the launch of the 12th Malaysia Plan, when our then Prime Minister announced to Parliament we will phase out coal from our power generation. And the year after that, 2021, they also announced that we will increase forest cover in Peninsular Malaysia by 700,000 hectares, yeah, because of this work they have done. So with our colleague in BCG, we look at all the different major sectors of carbon emission. So this is energy generation, transportation, industrial processes and utility, IPPU, agriculture, and other things. And we see that our forest that we have, which is 18 million hectares, we actually absorb 260 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. Now, from this total amount of emission, in 2016, about 330 million ton. Our forest absorbed this amount, and that left 75 million ton. In the next reporting period of the BUR Biennial Update Report 4, based on 2019 information, of course, over time, our energy has increased and so on. Therefore, our emission has also increased. But our forest, on the assumption that it remains the same, it absorbs this amount of carbon, and that leaves 115 million ton. Now, in the past, forest is very fluffy, right? Good for ecosystem services. What does that mean? Good for wildlife conservation, so what, right? But this figure now talks about, because of our forests that we have, Malaysia's journey for net zero is made so much easier, because just now over lunch, we were talking about carbon credit, and someone said, buying carbon credit to offset your emission. I said, you don't do that, right? Because then it's called greenwashing. You should really undertake your journey to decarbonize in all aspects, gathered by Science-Based Target Initiative, SBTi. And then only the last remaining carbon that you can no longer reduce is called the residual carbon. Then you go and offset, yeah? And you offset through the forest that we have here. So the study that we had undertaken is that the amount of carbon to be further reduced requires an investment of about $90 billion over 30 years. And some of my colleagues who were working on climate and so on, I said, are you guys crazy or what? Petronas itself takes hundreds of billions, yeah, to decarbonize, and you as a country, only 90 billion. I said, yes, you have forgotten the forest that we have. The forest has absorbed the carbon emission that leaves the remaining carbon. So that remaining carbon to decarbonize requires a range of between 350 billion to 450 billion. So these two charts here shows that if we go for low carbon emission, this is the amount of investment needed to the sectors to decarbonize, but you won't be able to achieve net zero. Net zero means that you balance out your emission, yeah. So you need to further invest. So this accumulated amount over 30 years is what we call by approximately 90 billion. It's a lot of money, but if you compare this to our GDP, through various formulation over here, as mentioned in the note here, it requires some 3 billion, and that is less than 1% of our GDP. It makes us so cheap, yeah, to go for net zero. And if we compare this to other countries, we are very competitive globally, and that's why PM then announced we will phase out coal and increase forest cover and so on. And I think in this session you need to learn more about things. One of them is what we call Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, CBAM. Go and download our report. It's for free. This is a product worth at least $2 million. Yeah. And so with that, then I will end my presentation by saying that, look, when we improve our forests, restore our forests, is good for biodiversity conservation. Yeah. But that forest is also our carbon sink. And that carbon sink actually improves our economy. And in terms of economy, Malaysian products eventually will be very competitive as we go to Europe. Yeah? Because in the CBAM, in the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, any import in Europe that have high carbon content will be taxed by the government. So they will be looking for products that have low carbon content. So Malaysia pathway towards the future is that our energy will be clean. Yeah. So the manufacturing process would be generated by clean energy. We have a lot of forests to absorb our emission. Yeah, there's another win. And if we talk about our commodities, yeah, like palm oil and rubber and so on, they are produced in the environment that is supporting conservation. So there are 3 wins here. Yeah. So you make Malaysian product very competitive. And my other mission is to work with my colleagues in Europe to how to develop this as a pathway for companies to invest in Malaysia, because with the energy price in Europe, it's no longer economic to have new factories over there, and with the far right movement now in Europe, immigration has become a problem. Therefore, if they want to set up plants or to improve plants, come to Malaysia. We have all these things ready for you. Yeah, so that's another mission I'm trying to promote. So with that, I would like to end my presentation, and if there are any questions, please. the lady, yeah.
Thank you very much for sharing with us about the important impact of forestation. Could you please go back to your curve, to your graph, which shows the curve? Yeah, because you have identified or maybe extrapolated that for 10 years there will be a surge upwards. Now it's 2025. Would the group doing this curve do a midterm review to see whether it's going to shoot back upwards or continue downwards? One question. Secondly, with regards to your announcement about the TFFF, which the official from Brazil mentioned yesterday, and you mentioned that is it WWF or Malaysia is part of the group? And from your viewpoint, who would be the sources of funds for this from Malaysia?
Okay.
Thank you.
So thank you very much. Yeah. So so this is actually coming from a report which actually is coming from the Living Planet report, the LPI. The Living Planet report is developed together by WWF and the ZSL, the Zoological Society of London, and other partners. So every 2 years, we look at all the reports coming from around the world, and biodiversity and ecosystem services and so on, mainly published reports, and then we will do an assessment and analysis. We will see in some species, there will be an improvement, some would decline. The decline is really the freshwater part. The rivers have been polluted, the dams and so on are killing of the rivers in terms of biodiversity and so on. But on the whole, some things are moving up, some are going down, some are stable. So the Living Planet report, it's a 2 years report. Every 2 years we do it will be the place to examine that. And a lot of information in Asia Pacific is not even sufficient to go into the report. We don't have enough references and so on and so forth. So a lot of the better information will come from Europe and not from America. So on the Tropical Forest Framework Forever Facility, TFFF, I think you can just Google it now. I think Mokobe and yesterday, I think Reuters or somebody mentioned about that, yeah? I forgot which newspaper. So it is an attempt by the Brazilian government, first introduced in COP in Dubai, and introduced last year in the Convention on Biodiversity in Colombia, where our minister Nick Nasmi attended, and we are supporting that. So the emission is to raise 125 billion, divided into two portions, what we call the sponsor capital and the private debt from the debt markets. So the sponsor capital are the donor countries, to your question. So the donor countries are the UK, France, Germany, Norway, UAE, and US. As we know, this is discussed since 2 years ago. So they are going to lay a capital of 20 billion USD as seed money. And then the other 100 billion will come from private sector financing, coming from all the investments and so on. So this money would then be reinvested into projects that can gain return between 2.5 to 3.5 return. So the return isn't used to pay off the debt market, and then after that the sponsor capital, and the balance then go to the tropical forest countries, those who are eligible and those who are participant to this. The payment is based on a proposed $4 per hectare. So what it means for Malaysia is that if we are eligible for all those criteria, we have about 18 million hectares of forest in Malaysia. So 18 million hectares times 4, converted to ringgit, is about 315 million per year. But there is some discount rate, which is penalty. So if you face deforestation, you'll be penalized by not receiving future payment. Yeah. So again, there's some financing there, and so just go to the website. I think the WWF would like to actually help our government to build these stories. Now, I thought it was the sponsor countries, the 6 of them: US, Norway, France, UK, Germany, and UAE. The tropical forest countries that have already been involved are Malaysia, Brazil, Colombia, Ghana, Colombia, I think I mentioned Colombia earlier, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and one more country I forgot. There are 6 of them. So these sponsor countries and 6 tropical countries form an interim steering committee, and they're working on the mechanics. And the mechanics have been supported by, by the World Bank and some of the financial institution. And WWF is also part of the process to support the whole thing. So like in Malaysia, we would like to, socialize this to our Malaysian, that this money is a good money to us. It's not much, it's only $4 per hectare, but it's going to be there forever. Because once the funds are able to pay back all this investment, it will be remain there as a capital to keep on paying. But as I mentioned earlier, through the net zero, the forest actually contributes a lot more than just the dollar and cents. It actually built our economy. We are heading towards a green economy that will create high income jobs and so on and so forth. Any other questions?
Just wanted to understand that map. I mean, it's good. Yeah, similar. The quality of the forest. Does that matter? I mean, it's different, right?
Okay. Does it matter? You mean the quality of the forest? So if you talk about carbon credit, so there's a formula, right? The formula is based on the trees that absorb carbon dioxide and how much carbon it may absorb and by over time. We talk about trees, you talk about species, and it depends on the hardness of the trees. So some trees are very hard because it takes a long time for the carbon to be captured and to be melded into the carbon. Some are fast-growing trees, but they will die eventually. You see a lot of some of the places, you see acacia trees, they look beautiful, but over time, they will die off. Like I'm staying in Alam Damai, behind my apartment, there's just a lot of dying trees. So when trees die, they also decompose, right? So the quality of the forest is dependent on the species and it dependent on the growth of the species. It's like we human health, right? If our lung is full of nicotine in our lung, obviously our capacity to inhale oxygen, into the bloodstream it's been reduced, right? So we need to improve that by reducing our intake of carbon dioxide, right, of the nicotine. Similarly, also we have to decarbonize our energy emission. So forest is very important. So under our net zero study, we undertaken a lot of consultation, and in one of the consultation with the ministry says, we were telling our Minister of Finance that, yes, we got a lot of forests in Malaysia, but they are degraded. We estimated at least 1 million hectares of forests that are degraded. So in the budget year of 2022, the then Deputy Secretary invited us to come up with a proposal. So we come up with a proposal to undertake the status of our forests in Malaysia. And we found that of the 12.5 million hectares of forest that have been, protected by law, almost 800,000 hectares is degraded, which requires some form of intervention to undertake restoration. So the 800,000 hectares requires billions and billions of money that we don't have. That's why we need to develop innovative financing, which I hope my colleague later on will come and introduce that topic to you. Yeah.
Thanks, Dr. Henry.
Yeah.
Mine's actually more business-related questions.
Mm-hmm.
Since you see there's actually potential, this biodiversity, where they can actually attract European companies to invest in Malaysia, right, in the medium term. What is your experience like working with businesses, especially in plantation, palm oil sectors, especially after EUDR, right? It's the same thing as like when you talk about CSDDD, businesses in Malaysia, especially in plantation, palm oil, they just hope that it's going to go away. So they rather not to sell to EU, rather than they try to look at the biodiversity strategy. So what's the experience like working the businesses in this area? Thanks.
So I mentioned about branding Malaysia, right, as a wildlife power-friendly nation. So actually it's about building a storytelling that we as a country, we have a lot of forests. Our forests are healthy, and healthy is is being represented by the presence of things. And those presents are the tigers, right? So we have a huge campaign on tiger, because the tigers are flagship species. If tigers are surviving well, it means the habitat is healthy. If the tigers go out and get killed by the road, something is wrong with the tiger. Why are they going out here? For certain reasons. And if the elephants are being killed, why are they being killed, right? So because they have no place to go, right? So it's a storytelling that we're talking to our European colleague, to my colleague in Europe, that look, you need to support us, because when you support the work that we do, you support wildlife conservation. The question is how. Your plantation, your industry has fragmented the forest and caused the death of animals. So we said, look, they are coming back. They are setting land aside to allow wildlife to thrive in the plantation. So we needed the facts and the evidence to show that wildlife does exist in the plantation and the thriving wild. Yeah. Not because they're just there, but because you actually have the corridors, you enrich the forest for the food and so on. So it is a story that that we are beginning to break that notion that our forests are gone. Yeah. So Malaysia now has become an important place, at least for WWF, to showcase to the rest of the world that if you have good policies, it results in good structures of governance, land use, and biodiversity will come back. Yeah. And this is the argument that we're having with my colleagues. Now, in terms of the actual market, so we are working with Samdabi now. Samdabi, called SC Country now, been rebranded to be our partner. And our partnership is about transforming them to be good. So we are starting at this place in Sabah. So this basically is Samdabi's plantation around here, around this place. So we want Samdabi to actually work towards this corridor here, yeah, to connect this area, this in Samdabi plantation, and also for Samdabi to have orangutan thriving within the plantation, yeah. So if you look, of course you can't see anything in this map, in this scale you can't see it, but there are dots and places where there are actually still forested left. Because under certification, you're not supposed to convert, important places. And those pockets of forest are actually still what we call refugia for wildlife, including orangutan. So we would like them to make sure orangutan are thriving well within the plantation, and then to set land aside to reconnect all these things. Now, why is it important to reconnect forests? Yeah, because wildlife, they are being marooned here, they will inbreed among themselves. You know that through inbreeding, it will lack of genetic diversity, and eventually you're unhealthy, you also become extinct. So the idea is to actually connect them so that they will access to the bigger population, and likewise, the population here will access to the bigger population in the rest of Sabah here. So there's also the other purpose of the wildlife corridor for genetic diversity. I hope my long-winded answer, helps you to understand that the issue is very complex. So you have multiple angles of engagement. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Henry. My question is more on the financing instrument. So let's say a landscape, right? Are WWF looking at other potential instruments such as payment for ecosystem service or biodiversity credit? Because carbon is just one ecosystem service or one commodity, right? And some forests that I know, they may have low carbon sequestration potential, like Gelam or Melaluka swamp, but they've had higher currency or higher value in terms of the ecosystems. So if you just lose carbon as a way to finance, you might neglect other potential, ecosystem service.
So completely agree. So that's why we're looking at landscape level. So when you talk about carbon credit, right, you only focus on specific units. So for example, a carbon credit, say this area here, but it has to be big area, like at least 10,000 hectares before you can, of economy of scale, you have to be involved in carbon credit. So if you focus only on carbon credit, then you only measure according to how much carbon being sequestered. But you talk about landscape wide, yeah, you talk about a whole range of values come in. So these are all the values that have been put together. So what we do is we look at carbon as just one aspect of financing. We also are developing with colleagues now on what you call biodiversity credit, and my colleague in Indonesia is leading that. You're asking about payment for ecosystem services. So it's actually based on buyer and seller. It's like when you buy water, you use water, you're actually buying a service from the forest, because the forest is the one that, if you drive around Spaniard Dam, if you go to Professor's Hill, you find there's a dam called the Selangor Dam. You know, the dam is for what? It's actually for our drinking water. We know how much are we paying? You only pay like 5 cents per liter, nothing, right? So actually, if PS, you should really pay more for that. But you know, we're not willing to pay for that. So again, example of Ulu Muda in Kedah. Ulu Muda Forest Complex is actually a place that provides water for Penang, the high-tech and the Kulim high-tech, the Mada rice fields that we are eating the rice, and yet we're not paying for that, right? So the WWF is trying to shift the thinking of the public by talking to the media, you know, and so on, so that look, when you protect the forest, it's not just, it's a whole range of services that we have. So in my context now, I'm trying to bring the palm oil industries to look into that. So your branding should be focusing not just about you being sustainable, you don't use certain pesticide or certain chemical, but really talking about conservation at large. So at the end, we are trying to make this area, this whole area, as a wildlife-friendly district. Yeah. So again, it's really a long haul, but we already have a system in place. So we have a standard called Conservation Assured Tiger Standards, CATS. Yeah, which if you comply with the standards, it means that the area is helpful for tiger conservation. It was developed in India, Bhutan, and Nepal for the protected areas for tigers. And the first site that they have been certified in Malaysia is the Royal Belum State Park. Somewhere up north here. Okay, this is the first certified in Malaysia. And we are now working with the Perak Forest Department to have the surrounding forest reserve to be tiger certified. So the vision is the product can be branded as tiger friendly. And be tiger friendly, then you pay a premium for that. And who is going to pay the premium? It will be the likes of the Hilton hotels, you know, the boardroom users on affiliation with tiger conservation. So you can assure that the product coming from to your boardroom, to your restaurants, to your hotel, are coming from a place that support tiger conservation, and there's a measurement for that. And we are trying to do that for orangutan as well. But they'll take, a lot of my colleagues don't agree with me, yeah. But it's okay. I'll leave it to the next generation. Yeah, to work on it. I mean, this work that I'm talking about, you know, I'm almost 60 years old. I've been talking these things since 20 years ago. And it's now catching on. Just to share with you, when we first developed this project in Tawau, Kuna, we approached HSBC Bank for support. Why HSBC Bank? Because a lot of the palm oil growers are actually HSBC account holders. And the bank has actually exited from the logging industry in Sarawak. And so the bank in Malaysia told us, you know, while we're supporting you, London is going to exit from the palm oil industries. They were saying that the billions they're getting is not worth that reputational risk in Europe. They're going to exit. But after our work here, they supported us. They said they want to support us. So now they are supporting us on 5 countries: Malaysia, Indonesia, China, India, and Singapore. And we're now going to phase 2 project. So HSBC is back in the palm oil business.
That's actually a good example for to keep HSBC in this business.
Yeah, if you talk to HSBC Bank, they will deny it. But probably say, yeah, we were planning to exit.
CEO is here, isn't it?
Is it? Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Could you share with us, like, to what extent or how the information or knowledge that you have shared today are relevant to like businesses or corporations? And for the second questions that I have is, I understand like all the benefits, like how the forest provides, and I understand how the carbon finance in terms of the carbon credits helps in conservation projects, that it becomes an important fund for conservation projects to be success or can be carried out. But how businesses or corporations can join in these carbon projects, as in terms like, it is very costly to make all those or develop all those carbon projects, and it will not profit enough maybe for the corporations to actually want to do carbon projects. And I understand maybe the carbon projects is like more towards government agencies or NGOs to do it, so that the carbon projects, like all the funds can be like efficiently put into the conservation efforts.
Let me try to give some real case studies how to answer you. You know the Sabah Sobot corridor, right? The 1,000 hectare titled land, which we are not sharing publicly, but it's an anecdotal story, is this. We have a graph talking about the damages that elephant caused to the palm oil plantation. Every year it's like 500,000 of damage. You know, the palm oil, elephant love eating palm oil because it's a pith, it's a shoot, right? So the damages half a million. But since we engaged with them and my colleague talked to the sustainable manager and so on, they adopted the practices, and they saw that the damage has reduced tremendously. And after they adopted the corridor measure and allowing elephants to freely roam, the damages were just like 3,000 per year, 4,000 per year. So completely negligible. So when I showed that graph to the board, of course, it makes a lot of sense, right? Because 500,000 lost every year. Now it's only this amount. So financially, your damage caused by elephants is reduced, and you get a good name. So as Sabah Sobot now is like branding itself now as having residence elephants within the plantation. That's number one. Number two is your question is how can business be involved in all this work? Central Bank, Bank Negara Malaysia is introducing what we call the risk filter. Risk filter is that as a company, you really need to assess the impact that you have on the environment, and got to report on that. For now, it's just a recommendation. You know, the bank doesn't impose, right, unless they're ready. So they have done that. Under the Global Boundary Framework, I think Article number 10, looks into how you as a business, you must report on the impact towards biodiversity. In the climate context, you have the Science-Based Target Initiative, SBTI, right, to measure that. So on the biodiversity, it's coming up. Recently, I'm part of the group led by the industries. We call it the Business Advisory Group to the Minister. We are promoting guidelines to all the PLCs to adopt. Basically, you need to know what the impact, so you can measure that. You can then report that as part of if you're a listed company, part of your ESG requirement, you can do that, right? So the value then is that the banks are going to invest in you because you are very low in terms of reputational risk, and in terms of your market, right? If you're going for Europe, and you know where are the markets you can pinpoint towards. I mean, things like Marks Spencer in the UK, Nestle, the Procter & Gamble, all these brands, right? They are all going for sustainable products. So a lot of the Malaysian big companies, they are all going towards that. Because a lot of them are RSPO certified. Some 28% of our palm oil industry in Malaysia are RSPO certified, and all going towards Europe. They won't tell you how much benefit they're getting, but obviously there's a reason why they want to be there, even though it's so difficult to comply with. So in terms of dollar and cents, we don't have that information to share with you, but we do know that there are a lot of links going towards Europe once they are RSPO certified. I'll give another example. There was one company in Malaysia who, for various reasons, they lost their RSPO membership. They said, to hell with it, we don't care about it. But the moment they lost their RSPO their membership, nobody wanted to buy from them. Immediately they got back, and to go back into the membership, they had to do a lot of good things. And today they are the best palm oil company in Malaysia. I won't name who they are, because of that punishment that they had. And the one last example is this is a smaller company called Sabah Sawit Kanabalu. We organized an event in Singapore, and they talked about the corridor. Immediately the Japanese buyer said, I want to buy from you. So this is, again, some stories that I can share with you. You have a question?
Oh, sorry, I just want to, when you talk about these conservation areas, right, it's not a reforestation project, right? So is this a boundary where you don't further develop palm oil? Or is it actual tree planting going on? Or how does it work?
So all these players are already been allocated palm oil licenses.
Yeah.
Okay, the only place that you don't do palm oil is within this forest area. But within palm oil area, you also cannot. So there's a notion called NDP: no pit, no deforestation, no exploitation. You need to do the assessments. So all these dots here and there, right? If you undertake convert, you will be decertified as an RSPO. So it's actually a multiple land use landscape. What we want to do is to again, going back to what we are working on, to reconnect places, and wherever forests within the forest reserve are degraded, we want to restore them. But my colleague who is working on this document here with the state government of Sabah, he's a bit crazy. I was questioning him the other day. Why bother looking at the forest areas and palm oil plantation? Because it's meant to be converted to palm oil. He said, because certification doesn't allow you to convert. So they left this place empty. These are like useless place, not shop lands, they're too steep or anything. But can you imagine all this place can be planted back, right? Planted back into forest. We will have additional land bank in Malaysia. So one of my mission with the government is that I mentioned earlier that Malaysia has allocated 20% of the land, right, for palm oil plantation, which is 6.5 million hectares. Now imagine if the palm oil industry set 10% of the land bank for conservation, we would have additional 650,000 hectares of land in Malaysia under forest, and they would contribute to our carbon sink. So all these places are what we're looking at now. And if you connect this with other companies, right, more places, they're actually more. So we were talking about earlier on, sorry, which map is it? Sabah, right? 800,000 hectares of Sabah is actually degraded. If we can restore half of this, we will have additional forest in Malaysia.
How do you actually restore? Or what goes into restoring forests?
Okay. So first of all, it's why you restore, why bother restoring, you spend so much money. Yeah, it's because number one, our forest is degraded. Right, they're degraded. Look at this color here. They're all lack of forest. So we spend a lot of money. I mean, we got donation by the millions to restore them. All right, people like you know, in Europe, in Japan, they give us money to do this work. Because why? They want to clean up the world. Second is we want to reconnect. The why. How now? Okay. So now my colleague who is working on the restoration, he will look at the soil condition. And what is purpose? If it's for wildlife conservation, what wildlife are you talking about? If for orangutan, you want to plant fruit trees for orangutan, all the species of fruit, you know, they can then eat the thing. If it's for ecosystem services, like because it's prone for erosion and so on, then you plant trees that can protect landslide from happening and so on. There's a new word, what we are now introducing, called climate resilience. So climate resilience means that you are also anticipating impact of climate change. So we adopt what we call the vulnerable index assessments. You look at the different climate scenarios over time, and you know that certain places are prone for drought. Drought is not just 1 week, 2 weeks, but months, or prone to flooding because of heavy rain. So you know this place is not suitable for agriculture and so on. What then you do? You plant things that are suitable for that climate scenario. So again, it depends on the purposes and what you do to it. Yeah. So there's a whole range of work. That's why it costs us $1,500 per hectare. It goes through a lot of processes. $1,500 per hectare, multiplied by 5 years. And if you go to Bond Challenge, BON, it's a former German capital, Bond Challenge. The global community has committed to restore 350 million hectares of land in the world. Yeah, and the financing comes from the ICI. ICI is the German International Climate Initiative, and the money is through carbon tax. So Germans are paying carbon tax, and that money goes to ICI, and ICI will then finance project in the world. So if you don't pay carbon tax, what they're asking the industry to do is, number one, you have to decarbonize, which means that you need to adopt new technology to reduce the carbon. Number two is buy forests elsewhere to support restoration and conservation. This is carbon credit. And the third is you don't do that, you pay tax. So the tax finance go into the IKI, and the IKI is about a few hundred million. So we are a recipient of IKI funding, and they go for a few million euro project, to undertake large scale of intervention. So go to bondchallenge.org, and that's where projects about restoration will take place. And of course, earlier on, our colleague mentioned about the TFFF. This is money to be given to government, yeah.
Doctor, my question is on engagement with smallholders, say, in these landscapes. So I assume some of the corridors that identified might be within, if maybe not in this landscape, if it happens in other landscapes, then what would be the best way moving forward? Are there financing mechanisms for smallholders that they can access, also incentivize them to be part of a sustainable landscape?
So we have a project called, this is Kelompang Forest Reserve, and it's actually part of the Ulu Kelompang, the upriver Kelompang. So this is the Ulu Kelompang agriculture schemes. There are a lot of smallholders here. So what about my colleague does, we have a program called Sustainable Palm Oil Team. We work with the smallholders, the community. Smallholders are people who own land less than, I think, 100 acres or so on. They are all independent, they grow themselves, and they sell to third parties. So what my colleague does is the program does is to bring them together, form it to cooperative, where we help them to adopt best practices heading to a certification. So once you are on a pathway to be RSPO certified, you get a carbon credit, RSPO credit. And that credit can be sold somewhere, a bakery in Europe who wants to be RSPO certified. They buy that credit, and so that credit is used for them that said, oh, my product is palm oil friendly. So it goes straight to the grower here. So there's mechanism for the transaction of this credit and money. Yeah. So even though they have not yet been certified, but they already obtained the certificate, they get advance payment, helping them to be certified. So we have now formed a few cooperative. And the money is actually a grant that we have received from the like of HSBC, Unilever. We have a German company called Biostop and Ebonic, the company that produces Nivea cream. Nivea cream is actually made from palm oil. Just supporting another landscape. They're supporting. So this is where I was showing Tawakona is. We have another landscape called the Tabin landscape, where I talked just now about Sawit Kanabalu, where after the conference, the Japanese buyers come to buy from them. So they are from this place, yeah. So we got a lot of grant by the millions, yeah, to do this work. Yeah. We don't give money to the community, but we provide grant to the corporacy to support them, yeah, to go to a certification. First of all, is to go to MSPO, which is a mandatory standard. Then go to RSPO.
I'll ask one more question. Thank you first for a very informative session. So I think it highlights the importance of LULUCF, right? Mm-hmm. And in the NATED itself, we do see mentions of we should stop deforestation and all these things, but then from my understanding, there's no direct legislation linked to LULUCF. Do you think ultimately, because we know that the land belongs to the state authority, and then the federal government is pushing for industrialization, like green data centers. So do you think that the government needs to have some policies that link to LULUCF, forest cover, these sort of things?
So LULUCF is this, right? Land use change, and forestry. So when you convert a forest, that's called land use change, right? You cut down forests, and the forest will rot. You will emit emission. In the past, we burn our forests when to clear cut, so that it caused a forest fire and haze. So we stopped doing that. So the emission has been reduced, but still the trees that are supposed to have keep the carbon, but now you have taken them off. So that place is no longer becoming a carbon sink. So that's when the land use change has happened. So there's a mechanism to calculate all of this, yeah. So your question about the law is, we have now a climate bill that has been discussed, yeah. So my colleague actually is part of that drafting process. So I think this Paris Agreement has resulted in a lot of change, yeah, including having new laws, the climate change bill, and so on. And we also have a CCUS carbon capture utility storage, right? Using the oil gas field to store the carbon. There's also been a bill now. So there are a lot of initiatives, a lot of framework have been in place, yeah, to do this. Yesterday, I happened to listen to BFM radio. I think the lawyers from Zaid Ibrahim were talking about how they draft the CCUS law. It's actually to prevent all the nonsense that's happening. Because I think one of the argument is that you allow the oil and gas to continue business as usual, and you capture the carbon dioxide, you liquefy them, you pump into the gas. So we continue. So remember, under SBTN, you have to actually decarbonize, right? You decarbonize as much as you can. But through our study with the Boston Consulting Group is that CCS is necessary to achieve the net zero. Because over the next 10, 20 years, we don't yet have the technology where you have a technology that can just capture the gas and so on, right? I mean, there are technology available, they're just too expensive. Still, we depend on the forest. So really, our report talks about, first strategy is to ensure our forests is being protected and restore them. That's the first, yeah. And then other sectors, you have to decarbonize. So this graph here talks about all the investments needed for we as a country to decarbonize.
Dr. Henry, thank you. Good that you touched about CCS, because I was going to ask you about that. Earlier during your presentation, you said how also you just mentioned how it's in forests, they sequester carbon, right? I think CCUS kind of emulates that, but it uses technology instead. I used to intern at WWF, and then there was voluntary credits. I think it was like a position paper of how businesses should go about, not using it for greenwashing, instead using it for your residual emissions. So I was just wondering if WWF would come up with a position paper for CCUS of sorts, to ensure that, because there are cases where projects, they dump in a lot of money and then it either gets cancelled or I think Sabah Alam Malaysia also, they talked about it a lot very recently. So I was just wondering if WWF is going to look into that, come up with a position paper.
So we are developing a global position paper. It's still being discussed. A position paper of the WWF means all the countries, all the officers in the world would have to have a consensus. So they are still being discussed, yeah. But basically, our concern about CCUS is this. I think there are three broad categories, if I can mention that. Number one is that there's no proven technology yet that it actually works, yeah. And what happens if the thing leak out, so you capture the carbon dioxide, you liquid them, you pump into the underground. What happens is a leakage, you damage the marine environment, or the corals would die, right? So there's more, they don't yet have the proven technology that it can really be 100% safe. Number two, as I mentioned it's about greenwashing, right? You continue business as usual. I think the third category would be, again, right, you should really decarbonize first. It's about climate change, right? I mean, I'll give an example. Why WWF working on beef in the Amazon of all places? Because you need to clear the forest to rear cattle, and the cattle is being bred for the market in China who want to eat the Wagyu beef. Wagyu beef, you want to eat the marble, right, in the meat. To have that marble, you need to feed with protein, and the protein comes from soya bean. So to have soya bean, you need to clear more forests to plant soya bean to feed the cattle, to feed the middle class in China, right? Similarly, the sashimi that you're eating, right? You want to eat the best sashimi, you go and capture all the tuna, and so on. So it's about consumption as well. So just to digress a bit, so we also have a program now called Sustainable Food Consumption. It's really changing the whole industries. So if we don't spend so much money on eating all the very expensive food. Expensive means that you need a lot of space, you need a lot of water. The cow, when they fart, they will produce methane, right? It's to actually change our lifestyle as well. Maybe my generation is too late for that, but it's your generation who can change the lifestyle, right? I hope I answered your question. But there's an argument when Petron actually were promoting CCUS in Sarawak, and I got to be involved because I'm a member. I'm a Sarawakian. I'm a member of the Sarawak Development Institute, so they engaged a focus group discussion. I actually questioned them. I said, look, the billions you're putting to develop a CCUS, why don't that billion you put into forest cover in Sarawak, right? Which is a natural-based thing, and you support conservation, you bring new job to the people, the poor Dayak community, the Orang Aslis, the Penan and so on, right? You're actually doing a favor for them. So, but they said that the forest is so difficult, this and that. A lot of issues like in Sarawak as well. And one of the reasons why the WWF doesn't take money on oil and gas is oil and gas are campaigning against climate change, and they are also investing in CCUS, and they are undermining the climate change, the debate. So we don't touch money from oil and gas at all. Just to say that if corporation want to give us money, we will do a due diligence on them. We will check the account. If they receive money for oil and gas, military base, pornography, we said, no, we don't take money from you.
Thank you for your passion and commitment in order to bring this into fruition. Yeah. But also you shared with us some of your challenges here. So I feel right now maybe it's very important to change the mindset so that people change their consumer behavior and all that. Do you feel the WWF should speak to the Ministry of Education in order for there to be a syllabus or a module on this so that the little ones are being fed with all this information and they will make their own, I would say, thinking so that as they grow up, they know this is right and that's wrong. So you don't have to wait a decade, 2 decades, which takes too long and we don't have much time. 2050 is really coming very soon. Yeah?
Yeah, so we have a program called Education for Sustainable Development, ESD program. It talks about the secondary schools, the colleges and the universities. About 6-7 years ago, when the then minister was very positive for the environment, he actually invited the WWF to have an officer placed in the department. So we have an officer actually placed in the department, seconded to the ministry to work on policies. But I think eventually he got so fed up, so frustrated. Things are not happening, so to resign. So I was so frustrated as well. Again, it depends on the leadership, right? So the EAC program we also have a number of programs. For example, we have a program called Business, working with the business sector. So we get youth, university students to be involved in a 3 days program, very intensive 3 days. At the end is the project. We hope that through this intensified 3 days training program, they will change their behavior and they become leaders in the future. So to us, we are investing in the future Malaysia to the young people. So I always say that, look, if these guys becomes directors, CEOs of the company in the future, they are the ones who make decisions. So you're absolutely right. But again, right, a lot of work comes from funding. The education program is not very, quote-unquote, sexy. So whereas palm oil work, we get a lot of money, HSBC Bank, Unilever, Procter & Gamble, and so on, because it's actually for their own survival as well. As I said, HSBC said that the billions making is not worth that reputational risk. But when they say our project, it actually salvaged the palm oil industries. And in some context, I actually made a claim, right? I said, look, we are the one who saved you, actually. I dare to make that bold statement. What's the time now, by the way? We're going beyond time. Where is my colleague, Ruben? It's a break now, right? He's supposed, I think, let me give him a call. I mean, this is the first time ever that session gone beyond time.
One group photo for.
Okay.
One group photo.